when my sister smirked and told me to step away because this table was for family, not for adopted girls. The entire restaurant went quiet. My parents laughed like it was clever. The waiter froze. I stood there burning while she pushed the bill toward me like a sentence already decided. They believed this humiliation would end with my silence. They were wrong. That night set something in motion they would never be able to stop. And what happened next shook everyone. Before I reveal everyone, just do one thing. Subscribe to the channel and comment your city so this story spreads further. What none of them understood was that this single evening, wrapped in laughter and cruelty, would quietly fracture something permanent. Before everything collapsed, before lawyers, cameras, and silence replaced dinners like this, there was this moment. One sentence, one laugh, one bill slid across a table. Go find another table. This one's for family, not adopted girls. The words landed hard, sharp enough to slice through the low hum of conversation around us. Forks paused midair. Someone at a nearby table glanced over openly. I stood frozen beside my chair, clutch pressed so tightly into my palm that the metal clasp dug into my skin. The voice belonged to my sister, Vanessa. Confident, casual, cruel in the way only someone protected by blood could afford to be. Laughter followed immediately. My parents laughed first, comfortable and practiced. My brother chuckled into his wine. Vanessa's husband smirked like this was an inside joke he'd heard many times before. Heat rushed to my face as other diners turned to look, curiosity flickering in their eyes. I had lived with this family for 22 years, adopted at 5, raised under their roof, shared birthdays, holidays, and photographs that still sat framed on their walls. And still, after all that time, I was reminded loudly that I was temporary. The restaurant was called Oraline, a place where menus had no prices and servers spoke softly, as if wealth itself demanded reverence. Everything about it signaled belonging. Everything except me. "Vanessa, that's enough," I said quietly, forcing my voice not to shake. "Oh, relax," my mother, Eleanor, said, waving a manicured hand dismissively. "We're teasing. You know how your sister is." I did know. At 32, Vanessa had perfected the art of humiliation disguised as humor. Growing up, she had the biggest bedroom, brand new clothes each season, private tutors, and a fully funded elite education. I had hand-me-downs, community college, and student loans I paid off alone. She was praised for mediocre effort. I was criticized for excellence. "Sit down," my father, Richard, snapped. "You're making a scene." I obeyed. This dinner was meant to celebrate Vanessa's latest business success, another real estate deal my parents had helped finance without hesitation. They always helped her. When I'd asked for a modest loan 3 years earlier to start my design studio, they laughed and told me to be realistic. Conversation flowed around me like I wasn't there. Vanessa bragged about her new luxury SUV. My brother, Lucas, talked about his promotion at the bank. My parents leaned in proudly, asking questions, offering praise. Glowing like this was proof they had raised their children right. When I mentioned landing a major client, a contract worth $50,000, my mother cut me off mid-sentence. "That's nice, dear," she said flatly, already turning to Lucas. "Tell us more about your bonus." By the time dessert arrived, I'd retreated inward, the familiar numbness settling over me like armor. This was my role. The outsider, the charity case, the one they tolerated to feel generous. Then the waiter approached with the check. My stomach dropped as he placed the leather folder directly in front of me. I stared at it, confused. "Why is this here?" Vanessa laughed, bright and sharp. "Oh, didn't we tell you? You're paying tonight. Think of it as giving back. You're always taking." "Taking? I've never asked you for anything," I said quietly. "The roof over your head," my mother replied calmly. "Food, clothes. We gave you everything." My hands trembled as I opened the folder. $3,270. They had ordered premium wine, imported steaks, lobster tails, and multiple appetizers. Lucas had ordered 3 desserts simply because he could. They knew exactly what they were doing. "I can't afford this," I whispered. "Yes, you can," Vanessa said sweetly. "You just told us about your big contract. This is nothing to you now." They knew it wasn't nothing. They knew this would drain my savings. But refusing would only prove what they always called me: ungrateful, dramatic, difficult. So I paid. I smiled, sipped water, signed the receipt with fingers that barely felt like my own. "Well, that was lovely," my mother said afterward. "Same time next month." Next month. They expected this to become routine. I opened my mouth to finally say no when a calm, authoritative voice cut through the table. "Enough." Silence fell instantly. At the far end of the table stood my grandmother, Margaret Hale, 78. Perfect posture, silver hair immaculately styled. A woman who had built a pharmaceutical empire from nothing and never spoke unless she expected to be obeyed. She had always been different. The only one who attended my school plays, remembered my birthday, asked about my dreams. Lately, she'd been watching quietly, eyes sharp with something unreadable. "I've changed my will," she said, pulling an envelope from her purse. "Signed yesterday." Vanessa's smile froze. "My entire estate," Margaret continued evenly, "will go to Elena." The room didn't erupt yet, but I felt the shift, because for the first time in my life, the laughter had stopped, and nothing would ever be the same again. For a moment after my grandmother spoke, nobody moved. It was as if the restaurant itself had frozen, chandeliers holding their breath, glasses suspended halfway to lips. I could hear my own pulse, loud and uneven, thudding in my ears. "My entire estate," Grandma Margaret repeated calmly. "Every account, every property, every investment will go to Elena." Vanessa was the first to react. "What?" She shot up from her chair, so fast it scraped loudly against the marble floor. "You can't be serious. That's not funny." My brother, Lucas, stared at our grandmother like he was trying to process a foreign language. My mother's face drained of color. My father set his fork down slowly, as if sudden movement might break something fragile. "Mother," my mother said sharply, her voice already rising with panic, "you're embarrassing yourself. Sit down." "No," Grandma said. "One word. Absolute. You will." Something in her tone made even my father stiffen. Vanessa remained standing, her face flushed with disbelief. "You're changing your will." Lucas asked, "Because of a joke?" "A joke?" Grandma's laugh was quiet, bitter. "I've watched you humiliate this girl for over 2 decades. I've watched you exclude her, mock her, and treat her like an obligation instead of family. And tonight, you made her pay for your excess while you laughed." "We were just having fun," Vanessa snapped, but her voice wavered. "Fun," Grandma repeated, as if tasting the word. "Is cruelty entertaining to you?" She walked slowly around the table until she stood beside me. Her hand rested on my shoulder, warm and steady. I hadn't realized how tense I was until that touch made my breath hitch. "Elena is the only one at this table with real character," she said. "She built a business from nothing, without help from any of you. She works hard. She's kind. She's resilient despite your best efforts to break her." "That's dramatic," my father muttered. "Is it?" Grandma asked quietly. "When was the last time any of you asked her how she was doing? Truly asked?" Silence. She turned to my brother. "Lucas, have you ever congratulated her on her accomplishments?" He stared at his plate. She turned to Vanessa. "Have you ever treated her like a sister instead of a target?" Vanessa's face burned red. "She's manipulating you," she hissed. "This is ridiculous." "No," Grandma said. "What's ridiculous is that you thought this behavior would never have consequences." My heart was racing so hard I thought I might pass out. So here's what will happen, Grandma continued. The trust is already prepared. My lawyer has the documents. Elena will receive full control. You can't do this, my mother cried. That's billions of dollars. Yes, Grandma said evenly, and she deserves every cent. She's not even really family. Vanessa screamed. The sound cracked through the room like glass shattering. Grandma didn't raise her voice. Family isn't blood. It's behavior. And by that measure, you failed. I sat frozen, unable to breathe properly. Billions. The word echoed in my mind, unreal, impossible. I hadn't known. I hadn't suspected. I hadn't planned anything. This isn't over, Vanessa snarled at me. We'll fight this. Try, Grandma said calmly. Everything is legal. I was medically evaluated this morning. Vanessa lunged forward, rage twisting her face. Lucas grabbed her arm, but his own anger was barely contained. My parents sat stunned, their world visibly cracking. You planned this, Vanessa spat at me. You played the victim. I didn't know, I whispered, my voice shaking. Grandma stepped between us. Enough. Elena has done nothing wrong. Not tonight. Not ever. My mother's voice broke. Why are you doing this? I'm your daughter. And you should be ashamed of how you've acted, Grandma replied softly. I gave you everything, Eleanor. You learned nothing about compassion. Instead, you taught your children cruelty. She turned to me then, her expression gentler. I didn't do this suddenly. I've been watching. And I've been preparing. My chest tightened. Preparing for what? Her eyes softened. Because I'm dying. The words knocked the air out of me. What? I barely got it out. Pancreatic cancer, she said calmly. Stage 4. A few months at most. The restaurant vanished around me. All I could see was her face. The only person who had ever made me feel wanted was leaving. She pulled me into a hug, her perfume familiar and comforting. This isn't sad. This is setting things right. Around us, diners stared openly now. Phones were out. Whispers spread. My family's collapse was happening in public, and there was no way to stop it. I want to go home, I whispered. Of course, Grandma said. Thomas is outside. We stood. My brother blocked our path. This isn't fair, he said hoarsely. Move, Grandma said, or security will. He stepped aside. Outside. Cold air hit my face, sharp and grounding. A sleek black car waited at the curb. As we pulled away, I watched my family through the window, Vanessa screaming into her phone, my parents frozen, Lucas pacing. I felt no triumph, only exhaustion. Inside the car, I finally asked, Are you really not afraid? She squeezed my hand. I've lived a full life. Now I get to protect you. As the city lights blurred past, I realized something terrifying and irreversible. My old life had just ended, and there was no going back. The drive from the restaurant felt unreal, like the city had slipped into a different dimension where everything familiar no longer applied. The car glided through streets I'd walked my entire life, but now every light, every storefront, every reflection in the glass felt distant. I sat beside Grandma Margaret in silence, my hands clenched in my lap, replaying the scene over and over again. The laughter, the bill, the words that finally shattered everything. You didn't know, she said softly, as if reading my thoughts. No, I whispered. I swear I didn't. I know, she replied. If you had, you would have stopped me. That's why I waited. The car slowed as iron gates opened smoothly ahead of us. I'd been to her estate before, but never like this. Never knowing that soon it would all be mine. The house stood back from the road, lights glowing warmly, perfectly trimmed hedges lining the driveway like silent witnesses. It looked peaceful, too peaceful for the storm that had just broken. Inside, everything smelled faintly of lavender and old books. Thomas, her longtime driver, took my coat with a nod that felt respectful in a way I wasn't used to receiving from anyone in my family. You should rest, Grandma said gently. Tomorrow will be busy. Sleep didn't come easily. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the silk sheets unfamiliar against my skin. My phone vibrated nonstop on the bedside table. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Dozens of missed calls, text messages stacking up like threats disguised as concern. You've gone too far. This is elder abuse. Answer the phone right now. We can still fix this. I turned the phone face down and stared at the darkness. By morning, the reality hadn't softened, it had sharpened. At breakfast, Grandma sat at the head of the table, composed but noticeably tired. A man I didn't recognize joined us, gray hair, tailored suit, calm eyes. This is Harold Green, Grandma said. My attorney. He shook my hand firmly. It's good to finally meet you. Finally. Folders were placed on the table. Thick ones. Harold began explaining the structure of the trust, the companies, the assets. Numbers poured out that didn't feel real. Billions in holdings. Properties across states. Stakes in companies I'd only read about in headlines. I don't know how to do any of this, I said quietly. You're not expected to, Harold replied. Not immediately. You'll have a team. There's more, Grandma said, her voice sharpening slightly. Your family will contest this. I swallowed. I figured. They'll claim I was manipulated, she continued, that I wasn't of sound mind. Can they do that? My chest tightened. They can try, Harold said, but we're prepared. He slid another folder toward me. Inside were bank statements, transfers, amounts that made my breath catch. When you were adopted, Grandma said slowly, a trust was created by your birth parents. $750,000, meant solely for your care. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the pages. They received it, she continued. Your adoptive parents. They were legally entrusted with it. I felt cold, received it, and they spent it. The words sank slowly, painfully. On vacations, on cars, on private school tuition for Vanessa, on Lucas's college, on everything except me. That's not possible, I whispered. They said they couldn't afford. They lied, Grandma said. I've been investigating for 2 years. My chest felt hollow. Every memory shifted. Every time I was told to be grateful, every time I was denied help, every time I was reminded of my place. They stole from you, Harold said gently. Legally, it's misappropriation. With interest, they owe over $2 million. I pressed my palm to my mouth, tears burning my eyes. This wasn't just cruelty. It was calculated. My phone buzzed again. My father. Put it on speaker, Grandma said calmly. I answered. Elena, my father said, voice tight. You need to stop this. Your grandmother isn't thinking clearly. She's sitting right here, I replied, surprised by my own steadiness. This inheritance, it's wrong. You've turned on us. The moment money is involved. I asked quietly. Silence. The moment money is involved, I continued. Or the moment I found out you stole money meant for me? My mother's voice broke through the line. That money was for raising you. You raised me on leftovers and guilt, I said, and spent my future on your children. They threatened court. They threatened exposure. Grandma ended the call. They will lose, she said simply. By afternoon, the story leaked. Headlines exploded. Social media ignited. Adopted granddaughter inherits billions. Family disinherited after public fallout. Some praised her. Others attacked me. Gold digger. Manipulator. Actress playing victim. I wanted to disappear. You don't need to defend yourself, Grandma told me. Truth doesn't rush. But the pressure mounted quickly. Reporters camped outside the gates. Anonymous accounts spread lies about my past, my business, my character. Someone claimed I'd been grooming Grandma for years. That night, a message came through from an unknown number. You ruined us. This isn't over. I showed it to Harold. Good, he said. Evidence. The next morning, my brother arrived unannounced. Security nearly turned him away. He looked smaller somehow, less polished. "We need to talk," he said. "The family is falling apart." "It always was," I replied. "We didn't know about the money," he insisted. "You didn't ask," I said. "You never asked about me. Not once." He left without arguing. That evening, Grandma asked me to sit with her. "I want to hold a press conference," she said. My heart dropped. "I can't do that." "You can," she said gently. "And you must. They're building a story. We tell the truth first." Fear curled in my stomach, but beneath it, something else stirred. Resolve. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't being asked to shrink. And the world was about to see why. The morning after the announcement felt heavier than the night itself. I woke up in a guest room that didn't feel like a guest room anymore. Sunlight spilling across silk curtains and polished floors. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then my phone vibrated. Again. And again. I didn't need to look to know who it was. My family had finally realized that silence meant panic. I sat up slowly, my chest tight, and checked the screen. 47 missed calls. Dozens of messages stacked on top of one another, like accusations waiting to be read. "You need to answer. This has gone too far. She's not thinking clearly. We can fix this if you stop now." I set the phone face down on the nightstand. My hands were shaking, not from fear exactly, but from the strange pressure of finally being seen and attacked at the same time. Downstairs, the house was quiet in the way only old money homes are. Thick walls, muffled sound, the faint scent of lavender and books. I found Grandma Margaret already awake in the study, seated behind her massive desk, posture straight despite the fatigue etched into her face. "You didn't sleep," she said gently. "Neither did you," I replied. She smiled faintly. That happens when people finally realize consequences exist. A man stood near the window, flipping through a leather folder. Gray hair, calm expression. The kind of presence that didn't need to announce authority. "This is Charles Bennett," Grandma said. "My attorney." He shook my hand. "It's good to meet you properly." The word properly stuck with me. Folders were placed in front of me. Thick, heavy, intimidating. Charles opened the first one and began speaking in a measured, careful tone. "The trust is already activated," he explained. "Certain accounts will be accessible immediately. Others are structured to transfer in stages." Numbers followed. Large ones. Ones that made my head spin. "I don't know how to manage this," I said honestly. "You're not expected to," he replied. "You'll be protected, advised. Nothing happens without consent." "There's something else," Grandma said quietly. She slid another folder toward me. Inside were bank statements, transfers, dates going back decades. "When you were adopted," she said, "your birth parents left a trust. $750,000. It was meant for your care." My stomach dropped. "They were given access," she continued. "Your adoptive parents." I flipped through the pages, my fingers cold. "They spent it," she said, "on cars, vacations, private tuition. Not on you." The room felt smaller. "They told me they couldn't afford," my voice cracked. "They lied," she said. "I confirmed everything 2 years ago." The betrayal settled deeper than any insult ever had. This wasn't favoritism. This was theft. My phone buzzed again. A call. From my father. Grandma nodded toward it. "Answer. Speaker." I hesitated, then tapped accept. "Elena!" His voice came through strained and urgent. "You need to stop this. Your grandmother is confused." "She's sitting right here," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "This inheritance, this is wrong. You're tearing the family apart." "The family did that a long time ago," I replied. Silence. "You took money meant for me," I said, "and spent it on everyone else." My mother's voice cut in, sharp and panicked. "That money was for raising you." "You raised me on leftovers and gratitude," I said quietly. and spent my future. The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a long moment, then set it down. They will fight, I said. Yes, Grandma replied calmly. And they will lose. Outside, I could already hear distant voices beyond the gates. Reporters had arrived faster than I expected. The world had noticed, and it wasn't done watching. By mid-morning, the estate no longer felt sealed off from the outside world. The quiet had been replaced by distant movement, voices carried by the wind, the low hum of engines idling beyond the gates. I stood near the tall windows in the hallway and saw them. News vans lined along the road, cameras pointed inward like the house itself was on trial. They came fast, I murmured. They always do, Grandma replied from behind me. Scandals age well. Charles returned with his phone pressed to his ear, murmuring into it before turning toward us. The story is already spreading. Someone leaked the will change. I didn't have to ask who. Vanessa had always believed the loudest voice won. Within hours, my name was everywhere. On screens, in headlines, in speculative articles written by people who had never met me but somehow knew my intentions better than I did. Adopted granddaughter inherits billions. Family claims manipulation. Legal battle looms. I scrolled once, then stopped. Each comment felt like a hand reaching out to shove me back into the place I'd occupied my entire life. She planned this. Gold digger. Poor old woman didn't stand a chance. Stop reading, Grandma said firmly when she found me in the library. They don't get to define you. I know, I said, though my chest still ached. That afternoon, my phone rang again. A different number. Unknown. Don't answer, Charles warned. I didn't listen. Elena! My sister's voice hissed through the speaker, sharp and trembling with rage. You think you won? You humiliated us. You did that yourself, I replied quietly. You turned her against us, she snapped. You always knew how to play the victim. I didn't even know about the money, I said. You did, and you still laughed. Silence. Then a low, dangerous laugh. We're contesting everything, she said. Court, media, everything. You won't survive this. The call ended. I didn't feel afraid. I felt tired. That evening, Charles laid out the strategy in detail. Medical evaluations confirming Grandma's mental clarity. Years of documentation. Emails, recordings, witness statements. Bank records tracing the misuse of the adoption trust. They'll claim undue influence, he explained. They'll say you isolated her. I didn't, I said. We know, he replied. But facts don't stop accusations. Preparation does. Grandma listened quietly, her hands folded neatly in her lap. When he finished, she spoke with surprising force. I want to speak publicly, she said. Charles frowned. Dorothy, you don't have to. I do, she cut in. They're constructing a narrative. We dismantle it. My stomach twisted. A press conference. Yes, she said. And you'll be beside me. I can't, I said instantly. I'll say the wrong thing. You'll say the truth, she replied. That's enough. That night, sleep refused to come. I lay awake listening to the house settle, replaying childhood moments I'd buried for years, being excluded from vacations, being told to be grateful, being reminded I was lucky to be tolerated. Near 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You're going to regret this. We won't let you walk away. I stared at the screen, then quietly forwarded it to Charles. Evidence, he replied. For the first time, I understood something deeply unsettling. They weren't angry because they'd lost money. They were angry because they'd lost control. And tomorrow, the world would be watching when that control finally slipped for good. Morning arrived without gentleness. The estate woke under pressure, like a sealed room losing air. From the upper floor, I could hear voices beyond the gates, reporters calling out names, camera shutters snapping in impatient bursts. Someone shouted my name. Hearing it from a stranger's mouth made it feel stolen. Grandma was already dressed when I found her in the sitting room. Not frail, not hesitant. She wore a tailored, slate gray suit. Pearls at her throat, posture immaculate. "You look ready for battle," I said softly. "I've been ready longer than they think," she replied. Charles arrived with a stack of folders and a grim expression. "Your parents filed an emergency motion late last night. They're requesting a psychological evaluation and temporary injunction to freeze assets." "So they're trying to delay," I said. "Yes," he answered. "And intimidate." Grandma smiled thinly. "They taught me patience. I taught myself endurance." By noon, the press conference room downtown was overflowing. Cameras packed shoulder to shoulder. Reporters whispered, like spectators before a public execution. When we entered, the noise swelled instantly. Flashes exploded. Questions flew. "Did you manipulate your grandmother? Is this about money? Are you really family?" Grandma sat calmly, hands folded, eyes sharp. Charles waited until the room settled. She spoke first. "I'm here because lies spread faster than truth," she said evenly. "And silence allows cruelty to masquerade as confusion." The room stilled. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "For over 2 decades, she continued, I watched a child grow up inside my family while being treated as an obligation, not a blessing. I watched her work harder for less praise, accept scraps without complaint, and carry shame that was never hers." Cameras pivoted toward me. "I changed my will because character matters," Grandma said, "and because blood without decency means nothing." A reporter interrupted. "Are you saying your daughter stole money?" Grandma turned slowly toward the question. "Yes," she said. "Money intended for a child's care. Documented. Proven. Traced." A murmur rippled through the room. Charles slid copies forward. Bank records. Trust documents. Dates. Amounts. "And I was of sound mind when I made my decision," Grandma added. 3 medical evaluations confirm it." She paused, then looked at me. "Elena," she said gently, "tell them why you never asked for this." My throat tightened, but I stood. "I didn't even know about the inheritance," I said. "I came to dinner expecting the same thing I always did. Silence, dismissal, and being told to pay." A few reporters shifted uncomfortably. "I wanted a family," I continued. "That's all. I didn't get one. But I did get someone who finally saw me." The doors burst open. Vanessa, disheveled, furious, uncontained. "This is all a lie," she screamed. "She's brainwashed you. She planned this." Security moved too late. A reporter shouted, "What about the adoption trust?" Vanessa spun toward him, eyes wild. "That money was ours," she snapped. "We earned it raising her." The room froze. I felt it happen, the instant realization, the moment her face betrayed her. Cameras zoomed. Silence collapsed into chaos. "She just admitted it," someone whispered. Charles stood. No further questions. Security escorted Vanessa out as she continued screaming, but the damage was irreversible. By evening, the clip was everywhere. Social media detonated. Lawyers weighed in. Public sympathy shifted violently, unmistakably. I sat beside Grandma in the quiet of the car ride home, phone buzzing endlessly. "You didn't plan that," I said softly. "No," she replied, "but truth has a way of arriving on time." For the first time since that night at the restaurant, I felt something unfamiliar settle into my chest. Not relief, not triumph, certainty. They could no longer rewrite what had been exposed. And the worst part for them wasn't what they'd lost. It was that the world had finally seen who they really were. By the time we returned to the estate, the gates were fully closed, security doubled, the air heavier than it had ever been. The silence inside the house felt deliberate, as if the walls themselves were bracing. I set my phone on the counter and watched it light up again and again. Alerts, messages, calls I didn't answer. Grandma lowered herself into her favorite chair. the effort costing more than she let on. The adrenaline that had carried her through the press conference was fading, leaving exhaustion behind. "You should rest," I said. "In a moment," she replied. "First, we finish the day." Charles arrived not long after, his expression sharper now, energized by momentum. "The clip of Vanessa is everywhere," he said. 10 million views in under 4 hours. Legal analysts are calling it an unintentional confession. "So it's over?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "The will contest is effectively dead. No judge will ignore that footage combined with the financial records." Grandma closed her eyes briefly, not in relief, but in completion. That night, the call shifted in tone. Where there had been threats, now there was pleading. My mother left a voicemail, her voice breaking. She spoke about misunderstandings, about love, about how families forgive. I deleted it without finishing. My father sent a single text. "We gave you a home. Don't forget that." I stared at the words for a long time before setting the phone down. Near midnight, my brother arrived unannounced again. Security called first. "He says he just wants to talk," the guard said. I hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. He looked smaller than before. Not frantic like Vanessa, just worn. "This went too far," he said quietly. "Mom's breaking down. Dad doesn't know what to do." "They knew what to do for years," I replied. "They chose not to." "We didn't know about the trust," he insisted again. "You didn't want to know," I said. "You benefited without asking why." He looked away. "When Grandma's gone," he said, almost pleading, "you'll be alone." I met his eyes. I was alone long before this. He left without another word. Later, Grandma called me into her room. She looked smaller in the lamplight, thinner, the illness no longer hidden. "I wanted you to see this part too," she said softly. "Power reveals people. Loss unmasks them." I sat beside her, holding her hand. "You didn't just inherit money," she continued. "You inherited freedom. Don't waste it trying to save people who never tried to save you." Tears blurred my vision, but I nodded. Outside, the estate lights glowed against the darkness. Reporters still lingered beyond the gates, waiting for something, anything to fracture again. But nothing did, because the fracture had already happened. And for the first time in my life, it wasn't inside me. The court date arrived sooner than I expected, as if the legal system itself wanted this finished before more damage could be done. The morning was gray and heavy, rain clinging to the city like a warning. As the car pulled up to the courthouse, I saw the crowd. Reporters packed behind barriers, microphones raised, cameras already rolling. This time, they weren't shouting accusations. They were waiting for confirmation. Inside, the courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and paper. I sat beside Grandma Margaret, her hand resting lightly over mine. She looked frail now, thinner than she had weeks ago, but her eyes were sharp, alert, unwavering. Across the aisle, my family sat together for the first time in years. My mother stared straight ahead, lips pressed tight, hands clenched in her lap. My father looked older than I remembered, shoulders slumped, confidence gone. My brother kept glancing at his phone, as if hoping for a miracle notification that would make all of this disappear. Vanessa was different. She sat rigid, jaw tight, eyes darting around the room. Fury barely contained. She didn't look at me once. Not because she couldn't, but because she refused to. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The proceedings were brief. Brutally so. Harold presented the evidence methodically. Medical evaluations, financial records, the adoption trust documents, the viral video transcript. Each piece landed like a stone dropped into still water, ripples spreading outward. The opposing counsel tried to argue diminished capacity, tried to imply manipulation, tried to reframe cruelty as misunderstanding. The judge didn't let them finish. "I've reviewed the materials," she said coolly, "extensively. This court finds no evidence of undue influence." Vanessa shifted in her seat, The will stands, the judge continued. In full. My mother let out a sound somewhere between a sob and a gasp. My father's face drained of color. My brother lowered his head. But the judge wasn't finished. Additionally, she said, the court finds substantial evidence of misappropriation of trust funds intended for the care of a minor. Restitution is ordered. The number was read aloud. The room reacted instantly, whispers, gasps, muffled shock. Vanessa stood up. This is insane, she shouted. You can't just. Sit down, the judge snapped. Or you will be removed. Security stepped forward. Vanessa froze, then sank back into her chair, trembling with rage. The gavel struck. Just like that, it was over. Outside, chaos erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions I didn't answer. How does it feel? Do you forgive them? What will you do now? I said nothing. I helped Grandma into the car, closed the door, and let the noise fade behind us. As the courthouse disappeared from view, she squeezed my hand once. You're free now, she said quietly. I believed her. But freedom, I was about to learn, has consequences of its own. The fallout didn't wait for the sun to set. By the time we reached the estate, my phone was vibrating nonstop in my bag, like something alive trying to claw its way out. I didn't look at it yet. I already knew who it would be. Denial always comes before desperation. Grandma was quiet during the drive, her eyes closed, breath shallow. The fight had cost her more than she'd admit. When we got inside, Thomas helped her to her room while I stood in the foyer, suddenly unsure what to do with myself now that the war had officially ended. I didn't have time to think. The doorbell rang, then rang again. Thomas looked at me, questioning. I nodded. When he opened the door, my mother stood there. No makeup. No carefully chosen outfit. Just a wrinkled coat. Hair pulled back hastily, eyes red and swollen. She looked smaller than I remembered, like someone who'd been hollowed out. Please, she said before anyone spoke. I just need to talk. Behind her, my father hovered near the gate, hands shoved into his pockets. My brother paced on the sidewalk, phone pressed to his ear. Vanessa wasn't there. That told me everything. Thomas looked at me again. I stepped forward. You have 5 minutes, I said. My mother's shoulders sagged with relief as she stepped inside, as if she'd already won something. She hadn't. She looked around the foyer, taking in the marble floors, the artwork, the space. I saw calculation flicker in her eyes before she caught herself. We never meant for this to happen, she said quickly. Things just got out of hand. I didn't respond. We raised you, she continued. We gave you a home. You were paid to, I said calmly. Her mouth opened, then closed. That money was for the family, she insisted weakly. Everything we did together. No, I replied. You decided who counted as family. Silence stretched between us. Then her voice broke. You're destroying us. I studied her face, the same one that had looked through me for years, the same lips that had laughed when I was excluded, the same eyes that had never once asked if I was okay. You destroyed yourselves, I said. Her tears came fast after that. Loud, performative, the kind meant to pull sympathy from witnesses. I'm still your mother, she whispered. No, I said gently. You were never that. Outside, my brother knocked sharply on the glass. Rachel, he called. Please, we can fix this. I turned toward the door. There's nothing to fix, I said loud enough for all of them to hear. Thomas stepped forward then, firm and unmoved. Time's up. My mother stared at me, waiting for something. Regret, doubt, weakness. She didn't get it. As the door closed behind them, I felt something unexpected settle in my chest. Not triumph. Not anger. Relief. For the first time in my life, their voices were on the outside, and I was finally safe on the inside. I didn't sleep that night, not because of fear or regret, or the chaos outside the gates, but because my body didn't know how to rest without waiting for the next blow. Years of bracing myself had rewired something inside me. I lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of a house that had never once felt hostile. No footsteps outside my door. No voices whispering about me downstairs. No sudden demands. No accusations. Just silence. It felt unnatural. Sometime after midnight, my phone buzzed again. I checked it this time. Unknown number. One message. You think you won. This isn't finished. I didn't need a signature. I could hear Vanessa's voice in every word. I took a screenshot, forwarded it to Walter, and turned the phone off. Evidence. Always evidence. Morning arrived gently. Pale light filtered through the tall windows, and for a moment I forgot where I was, until memory rushed back in full force. The restaurant, the bill, the announcement, the courtroom, the door closing on my parents' faces. Nothing about this was a dream. When I went downstairs, Grandma was already awake, wrapped in a shawl, sitting by the window overlooking the water. She looked smaller somehow, as if the weight she'd been carrying for years had finally been set down, and taken something from her with it. You shouldn't be up, I said softly. She smiled without turning around. I didn't raise a fighter just to nap through the aftermath. I sat beside her. They came last night, I told her. All of them except Vanessa. I assumed as much, she said. Desperation makes people bold. I didn't let them stay. Her hand found mine. Warm. Steady. I know. I swallowed. I'm not angry anymore. That's good, she replied. Anger keeps you tied to people who don't deserve the rope. Later that morning, Walter arrived with documents and updates. The restitution order had already triggered asset freezes. My parents' accounts were locked. Their house was flagged for liquidation. Vanessa's business credit lines were under review. The inheritance contest had collapsed completely, no appeal. It's over, Walter said plainly. I waited for the rush, the satisfaction, the vindication. It didn't come. Instead, I felt quiet. That afternoon, I walked the grounds alone. 3 acres of gardens, pathways, and water views. Space I'd never been allowed before in more ways than one. I stopped near the old oak at the edge of the property and pressed my palm to its bark. I thought of the girl I'd been at 5 years old. Small, confused, grateful just to be taken in. I wished I could tell her something. Not that it would get better, but that it would end. That the people who made her feel small would one day lose their power. That survival wasn't the final chapter. That building something new was. When I went back inside, Thomas was waiting with tea. You handled everything with dignity, he said. I didn't feel dignified. He smiled. That's usually how strength feels in real time. That night, as I sat beside Grandma while she slept, I understood something I hadn't before. This wasn't about money. It never was. It was about choosing who gets access to you. And for the first time in my life, I was the one holding the keys. The first real change didn't come with headlines or court rulings. It came quietly on a Tuesday morning when I realized no one was monitoring my phone, my calendar, or my choices. For the first time, my life didn't require permission. That realization was heavier than the inheritance. Walter helped me set up a temporary office inside the house while the legal dust settled. Boxes of files arrived daily, company reports, investment summaries, board meeting notes. At first, the numbers blurred together. Billions didn't feel real. They still don't. What felt real were patterns, structures, systems, the same things I'd always been good at seeing. Grandma watched me work from her armchair, saying little, observing everything. You're not overwhelmed, she finally said one afternoon. I am, I replied honestly. I just don't panic anymore. She smiled. That's because you learned survival early. Strategy comes naturally after that. The press tried new angles once the courtroom drama died down. When scandal failed, they tried curiosity. Profiles, human interest pieces, requests for interviews framed as empowering. I declined all of them. I didn't owe anyone access. Vanessa tried a different tactic. An email arrived late one night, carefully written, emotionally calculated. She said she was spiraling, that her marriage was collapsing, that she'd lost herself under pressure. She didn't apologize, not really, but she acknowledged mistakes and asked to meet, just as sisters. I read it once, then again, then I deleted it, not out of anger, out of clarity. Sisters don't require emotional blackmail to speak. A week later, my father attempted something similar. A letter, handwritten. He talked about regret, legacy, and forgiveness. He didn't mention the stolen money. He didn't mention the years. He focused on his suffering. I filed it away, not as a reminder, as evidence of who he still was. Grandma's health declined faster after that. Not dramatically, not with pain, but with certainty. Her doctors were honest. Time was narrowing. She knew it. So did I. We spent long afternoons together, sometimes talking, sometimes just sitting in silence. She told me stories she'd never shared before. Failures, betrayals, people she'd trusted who hadn't deserved it. You don't get stronger by avoiding loss, she said once. You get stronger by choosing what grows afterward. I told her about the foundation idea again. She listened closely, asked questions, made suggestions sharper than most board members I'd met. You'll do it, she said. Not because you owe me, because you know exactly what those children feel like. She was right. The night she passed was quiet. No alarms, no panic, just a slowing breath, a final squeeze of my hand, and a peace that felt earned rather than tragic. I stayed with her long after. Grief came later. The funeral was private, purposefully small. No spectacle, no statements. Just a few people who had loved her for who she was, not what she owned. My family wasn't invited. They tried anyway. Security handled it. In the weeks that followed, the estate finalized. Trusts activated. Boards confirmed. Power transferred, not ceremonially but functionally. People stopped asking who I was related to and started asking what I wanted to do. That shift mattered. The foundation became my first priority. Legal support for adopted children. Emergency relocation funds. Independent oversight so no guardian could exploit them financially the way I had been. I staffed it carefully. No favors. No family. Only professionals who understood accountability. When the first child was relocated out of an abusive home because of something I'd signed, I locked myself in my office and cried harder than I had at the funeral. That was the moment everything clicked. This wasn't about winning. It was about ending cycles. News trickled in about my family, whether I asked for it or not. My parents lost the house, then the cars, then the pretense. Charges moved forward. Plea deals failed. Sentences followed. Vanessa's business collapsed. Partners distanced themselves. Her social circle evaporated. Kenneth disappeared quietly, the way men often do when status leaves faster than pride. I didn't celebrate any of it. I didn't need to. Their downfall wasn't my achievement. My peace was. One evening, months later, I stood in the study looking out over the water and realized something else had changed. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for apologies. Not for validation. Not for anyone to admit they were wrong. I had built something that didn't require their acknowledgement to exist. And that, more than the money, was the moment I knew they could never touch me again. The world didn't stop after everything ended. That surprised me more than anything else. I had imagined some dramatic silence, some pause where life acknowledged what had happened. Instead, mornings still came. Emails still arrived. Meetings still filled calendars. The difference was that this time every decision had weight, and every choice belonged to me. The company's grandma built didn't collapse under my watch, despite what critics predicted. They adapted. Boards tested me quietly at first, watching to see if I'd defer, hesitate, hand authority back to men who believed they deserved it more. I didn't. I asked questions. I read everything. I challenged assumptions. When something didn't make sense, I said so, even when it made rooms uncomfortable. They learned quickly. Power, I discovered, isn't volume. It's consistency. The foundation grew faster than expected. Applications poured in from across the country. Stories worse than mine. Children adopted for money, labor, appearances. Kids discarded emotionally once the novelty wore off. Teenagers threatened with homelessness the moment they stopped being convenient. Every file hit hard, but instead of breaking me, it sharpened something inside. This was never about generosity. It was about correction. I hired investigators, lawyers, social workers who had burned out fighting broken systems and were ready to build better ones. Oversight boards were formed with strict limits, so no one, not even me, could turn the foundation into a vanity project. Grandma would have liked that. Sometimes, late at night, I caught myself reaching for my phone to call her, to tell her something small. A win, a doubt, a quiet fear. Grief isn't loud forever. Eventually, it becomes a presence that walks beside you instead of knocking you down. I learned to carry it. My family made one final attempt months later. A joint letter. All signatures. They framed it as closure. They said they were willing to move forward. That holding on to anger would only poison the future. That forgiveness was strength. They asked for a meeting. I didn't respond. Not because I couldn't. Because I didn't need to. Strength doesn't require confrontation once clarity arrives. Public interest faded eventually. Another scandal replaced mine. Another heiress. Another headline. My name slipped out of trending feeds and into footnotes. That was a relief. I didn't want to be a symbol. I wanted to be effective. A year passed, then another. The Foundation's first annual report showed over 500 children relocated, protected, or legally emancipated from abusive guardianships. Scholarships funded. Court precedents set. Policy recommendations adopted. I stood in the new headquarters, glass, light, open spaces designed deliberately to feel nothing like the homes those kids came from, and felt something I had never felt growing up. Belonging. Not to a family. To a purpose. I still think about who I might have been if things were different. If I'd been adopted by people who wanted love instead of leverage. If childhood hadn't trained me to anticipate cruelty. But I don't dwell there. That version of me survived, so this one could exist. Sometimes I hear updates about my family through secondhand channels. Vanessa working jobs she once mocked. Kenneth living quietly, far from the circles that once praised him. My parents aging faster than expected. Their world shrinking to the size of consequences they never believed would arrive. I don't intervene. I don't gloat. I don't rescue. I learn the difference between compassion and self-betrayal. On the anniversary of Grandma's death, I visit the lake alone. I bring nothing ceremonial. No flowers. No speeches. Just time. I tell her about the kids. About the wins. About the nights I still doubt myself and the mornings I don't. I thank her. Not for the money. For the mirror. She showed me who I was long before anyone else did. People ask sometimes if I ever feel like I won. That question always feels wrong. This wasn't a competition. It was an escape. It was a rebuild. It was the long, quiet process of choosing myself after years of being told I didn't qualify. If there's a final truth in all of this, it's simple. The people who tried to break me believed power was inherited, guarded, and enforced through fear. They were wrong. Power is what happens when the person they dismissed stops asking permission and starts building anyway. And by the time they realize it, there's nothing left for them to take. If my story held you till the end, do me a small favor. Follow the channel, tap like, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Your support helps these stories reach others who need them just as much.